It is now 2 p.m. Geneva time, 3 p.m. in Nairobi. So with your permission, Mr. Chair, we are now officially launching this event.
Yes, of course.
Excellencies, dear colleagues, welcome to the second session of the new short series of events that we have launched today, co-organized by the Geneva Environment Network and the ad hoc open-ended working group on the Science Policy Panel on Chemicals, Waste and Pollution Prevention, on the road to their third meeting that will take place in Geneva in June this year. As those who are familiar to this process know, the United Nations Environment Assembly in 2022 made history by adopting a series of landmark resolutions, including the one that decided to convene the ad hoc open-ended working group. In the context of the triple planetary crisis that the Earth is facing of climate change, nature and biodiversity loss, as well as pollution, two independent international intergovernmental bodies to help policymakers taking the right decisions have been set up for two of these crises. For climate change, we have the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, known as IPCC. For biodiversity loss, we have the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, known as IPBES. The aim of the United Nations Environment Assembly resolution that is bringing us together today is to set up a science panel for the third crisis on chemicals, waste, and pollution prevention. So in the lead-up to the establishment of this science policy panel, this new series of events aims at building bridges and promote collaboration and knowledge sharing between and among stakeholders, and to raise public awareness, preparing proposals for the establishment of the panel. Today, we are discussing possible ways to implement the capacity building function of the panel. We had already a first session in the morning to accommodate participants in different time zones. I would also like to highlight that the host city for the third session of the open-end working group, Geneva, where I'm sitting today, is a global hub for the governance of hazardous substances. Geneva is indeed the home of various organizations and multilateral processes actively working to reduce the environmental and health risks from chemicals and waste and tackling pollution. As coordinator of the Geneva Environment Network, I can confirm that there is therefore particular interest and enthusiasm from many Geneva-based stakeholders to welcome the delegates joining us from all over the world for a timely outcome of this negotiation. The working group is indeed expected to conclude its substantive discussions on proposals for the establishment of a science policy panel at this meeting. So before handing over to the Bureau and the Secretariat to formally welcome you, let me remind all our attendees that the documents, the video, as well as the summary will be made available on our website, and the link is being shared in the screen and in the chat. And throughout the event, you can raise your questions by using the Q&A box. We have a dedicated session to answer these after the presentations. And we will also have interactive discussions for those who have will be announced. So we will allow some of the attendees to open their microphone. Alexander Rosnov, representing Romania at the Open-End Working Group Bureau, will chair this session. So without further ado, Mr. Rosnov, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Diana, for this introduction. Dear colleagues, my name is Alexander Rosnov. I'm a member of the Bureau of the SPP OEWG as one of the representatives of the Eastern European states. It is a pleasure to have you all today attending this webinar, and I would like to start by thanking you for your presence. If you are here today, it is because you are fully aware that the triple crisis our planet is currently facing does not limit itself to climate change and biodiversity loss, but that pollution is also a major concern that we need to tackle rapidly and with high ambition. To do so, we need to make sure that the voice of scientists are heard, and that in return, actors and policymakers can use the best available science to guide their decision. This is why the work of the Science Policy Panel on Chemicals, Waste and Pollution Prevention is so important, and therefore why we need to ensure to take the right decision at the next OEWG in June in Geneva when we are concluding our work. One of the important topics that will be discussed in June concern the future capacity building function of the panel. Capacity building is indeed a central function to ensure the adequate participation of representatives from all parts of the world, as well as to facilitate the uptake of the results that will be put forward by scientists into policies and action. For this reason, during the resumed first session of the open-ended working group, government representative agreed that regarding the principal function of the new panel, the fourth function as adopted in the Environmental Assembly Resolution 5.8 should be included, and that a fifth function, a capacity building, should be added. At OEWG2 in December 2023, government representatives also agreed that further discussions were needed to finalize this function. They therefore requested the Secretariat to prepare, in consultation with the Bureau, a webinar on the capacity building function of the panel, and to submit following this webinar a summary of the views expressed for the information of the OEWG at its third session. This webinar has been organized by the SPP OEWG Secretariat and the Geneva Environment Network following this request, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank them for their work. The webinar is organized as follows. First, Tessa Gaverse, head of the SPP OEWG Secretariat, will present the current state of the negotiation on capacity building. Then, Zayun Wang, also from the Secretariat, will present an overview of capacity building activities of the existing science policy interface and in chemicals, waste, and pollution prevention space. After this, we have the honor of welcoming Ingun Storo, head of the Technical Support Unit in charge of capacity building at IBES. She will explain how IBES organizes its capacity building activity. We also have a presentation by Mayasun Mustafa, an IBES fellow, who will present us with her experience as a beneficiary from one of the IBES capacity building activities. After a short Q&A session with the presenters, we will then move to a discussion session among the participants that I will moderate. The goal of this session is to allow each of you to present your views on the capacity building function of the future panel. What is it that this function should deliver, and how could this be done? Before we dive further into the program of this webinar, I would like to make some few practical remarks. If you have specific questions for the presenters based on their presentation, please keep them for the Q&A session that will take place after the intervention from Mayasun Mustafa. If you want to share more general views on capacity building, please keep them for the discussion session at the end of the webinar. At this webinar, aims of sharing views and broadening our common understanding, we will take questions and remarks from government representatives, stakeholders, and other participants in no particular order. We had already a fruitful discussion in the morning, and we are grateful for the inputs received in it. So finally, as I said earlier, OEWG2 requested the Secretariat to provide a summary of the views expressed during the webinar for consideration at OEWG3. The webinars are therefore recorded to facilitate the capturing of the views and will be available on the GEN website, and the transcript will serve to inform on information document for OEWG3, providing a summary of the views expressed. I will give now the floor to Tessa Gaverse, head of the OEWG Secretariat, to let her present the state of the ongoing discussion on the capacity building function of the panel. Tessa, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Alexandru, and good day, everyone. Also, on behalf of the SPP Open and Working Group Secretariat, a warm welcome to the webinar today. And before we dive into the function of capacity building, let me also remind everyone of the overall objective of the Science Policy Panel, which has been proposed to be as follows: to strengthen the science policy interface, to contribute to the sound management of chemicals and waste, and to prevent pollution, for the protection of human health and the environment, with 5 functions. And these 5 functions are: first, undertaking horizon scanning to identify issues of relevance to policymakers, and where possible, propose evidence-based options to address them. Second, conducting assessments of current issues and identifying potential evidence-based options where possible, to address those issues, in particular those relevant to developing countries. Third, providing up-to-date and relevant information, identifying key gaps in scientific research, encouraging and supporting communication between scientists and policymakers, explaining and disseminating findings for different audiences and raising public awareness. Fourth, facilitating information sharing with countries, in particular developing countries seeking relevant scientific information. And fifth, capacity building. So as Alexandru already said, one of the important ongoing discussions in the preparation of the third session of the Open-Ended Working Group is the function of capacity building. And if you go to the next slide, at the second session of the Open-Ended Working Group, the Secretariat was requested to prepare, in consultation with the Bureau, timely webinars on the capacity building function of the panel and submit a summary of the views expressed for information to the ad hoc Open-Ended Working Group at its third session. This webinar is a direct response to this request, and we're very grateful for the collaboration with the Geneva Environment Network on providing this. We also think this webinar is timely, as next month a series of regional meetings will take place in preparation for the third session of the Open-Ended Working Group. At the third session, governments may wish to agree on text on the capacity building function of the panel. And currently, 2 text proposals are on the table. And these are on the next slide for your information, and I also will read them out. The first text proposal is provide capacity building through all the functions of the panel and facilitate technology transfer, in particular to developing countries, to improve the science policy interface at appropriate levels, including activities to ensure effective, geographically balanced and gender-responsive participation of scientists in the assessments of the panel, strengthen data generation capacity, enhance knowledge and skills that will support country infrastructure and human capacity, and facilitate connection and matchmaking of capacity-related needs and potential solutions. The second text proposal reads as follows: build capacity to support the functions and work of the panel in order to strengthen the science policy interface for sound management of chemicals and waste and to prevent pollution. And with these 2 text proposals, I would like to thank you for your attention and hand back to the chair. Alexandru, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Tessa, for this useful presentation. As you said, capacity building will be an important topic at OEWG 3. It will be important to agree on the definition of the capacity building function to guide the panel in determination of its work program that can answer to the needs of all countries and support ones that need it the most. As I just want to remind participants that if you have questions, please write them in the chat and we will raise them during the Q&A session. Now I will give the floor to Zayun Wang, a member of the SPP Secretariat, who will present various types of capacity building activities carried out by existing SPIs and in the chemicals, waste and pollution prevention space. This will be give all of us ideas and inspiration for potential future capacity building activities for the SPP, but also outline what existing activities are already undertaken. Zayun, you have the floor.
Yeah, many thanks for the introduction. I'm happy to present on behalf of the Secretariat on 2 previous mappings that the Secretariat has conducted. Here we'll present the main elements, and you may find more details on the activities of existing science policy interfaces in the working document 5 prepared for the OEWG 1, and also the activities of international bodies working on chemicals, waste and pollution prevention in the INF document 3 prepared for OEWG 2. I'll first start with the overview of activities by existing science policy interfaces. Yeah, in general, that we observed that many existing science policy interfaces do conduct capacity building activities, and they can be grouped into 3 broad categories. And I will give you some examples about each of the category in the next slides. So first, next slide, please. First, they do conduct activities that ensure the effective participation of scientists and other stakeholders in the body's assessment work. So we have seen that IPCC, EBS, and the Stockholm Convention's POPs Review Committee have developed guidance documents to support effective participation, complemented by webinars, e-learning courses, and regional workshops. Next slide. Yes. The second type of activities are activities that enable young people and earlier professionals, and for 2 major purposes. One purpose is to enabling participation in the work of the science policy interfaces. Later on, you will also hear the examples from EBS on the fellowships. And then the second is to develop the capacity of young people and early career professionals in a more broad sense. So including the IPCC provides scholarships for the students from developing countries to conduct research on climate change, and the UNEP Global Environment Outlook Secretariat developed a global science policy diplomacy program based on geo and other environment assessments. Next slide, please. And the third type of action activities are more broad-ranging means of developing the capacity of individuals and organizations in a more general sense, including developing training materials and data, for example, that EBS, like through its strategic partners and contributing supporters to develop training materials based on the EBS assessments. And the second type is to facilitating connection and matchmaking. So like EBS and UNCCDs, they either organize these self-organizing communities of practice of experts to increase access to expertise and information, or have this online marketplace to connect needs and solutions. And then the third is to encouraging information sharing and also sharing of best practices among national and regional branches or platforms. So these are the overview of the capacity building by existing science policy interfaces. And the Secretariat also conducted work on mapping the capacity building activities within in the chemicals waste and pollution prevention area. And the analysis highlights the existence of a wide array of activities beyond science policy interfaces, with a variety of modalities and points of intervention in the policy cycle. We will present the examples illustrating the major types of activities undertaken, but as said, you may find more details in the corresponding INF document 3 developed for OEWG 2. So the first type of the activities are that there are organizations carrying out activities to support the implementation of existing MEAs. As an illustration, here's an example of the sub-regional workshop that was organized by the BRS Secretariat to enhance science policy interaction and support parties in science-based decision-making for implementing the BRS Convention. The second type are the activities to develop countries' capacity for scientific analysis. Here's a very brief example of the marine environmental studies laboratories of the International Atomic Energy Agency. They have this program to support the laboratories to conduct assessment of marine pollution by chemicals. There also the third type, if we go to the next slide, you can see that there are also organizations develop activities to develop countries' capacity for the broad sound management of chemicals and waste and pollution prevention. For example, the International Labour Organizations developed a toolkit on how to ensure workers' chemical safety and promote environmentally sound practices. And another example is UNEP. Here's kind of the intergovernmental network on chemicals waste for Latin America and the Caribbean regions, among many other capacity building projects around the world. So within this particular project, an action plan was developed for 2021 to 2024, including action on the development of regional assessment and data collection on chemicals and waste, and the dialogues on effective communication of scientific information and data to strengthen the science policy interfaces, and also trainings and workshops on priority topics for the GRULAC region. And most recently, the global chemicals global framework on chemicals was adopted in September last year. It also included that under the global framework on chemicals, capacity building strategies and the supporting technology transfer on mutually agreed terms will be developed, including the capacity building tools and other initiatives. And these strategies will be regularly evaluated and improved. And also the framework will consider the capacity building needs of all stakeholders and make any necessary recommendations. So this is the three types of capacity building activities that are already conducted in the space of the chemicals, waste, and pollution prevention. In the next slide, you can see some general observation. So there is many international organizations are involved in capacity building activities and on chemicals, waste, and pollution prevention. There is a continuum from science to action. Different organizations take different roles in this continuum, and existing science policy interfaces focus mainly on capacity building activities related to their own scientific processes, including the effective participation, and they collaborate with other bodies working on other aspects of capacity building. For example, like building capacity for the uptake of existing science policy interfaces work, and for the more enhancing general capacity at the national and the regional levels, many institutions are already conducting corresponding activities at all the levels. So, so this is just a very brief overview, and you're encouraged to also look into the two documents for more details. Thank you so much.
Thank you as well, Zion, for this element. It is interesting to see that the model that has been chosen by other SPIs and to see the breadth of what is already occurring in the chemicals, waste, and pollution space. I hope this example will give us ideas on how to operationalize the panel's capacity building function, whilst thinking about how to avoid duplication of work and foster synergies with already existing activities. Indeed, it was a part of UNEA's 5-8 resolution to acknowledge the need to enhance collaboration and avoid duplication of work. This is an important question we need to ask ourselves in the work of the OEWG. To deepen these reflections, we thought it would be important to learn more from the experience from other science policy interface, which had asked itself similar questions as we are doing now. So we chose to present the work of IBES as it is also a science capacity building function. IBES developed an ambitious and interesting strategy that could be inspiring for the work of the SPP. I will therefore let Ingun Storo and Mayasun Mustafa take the floor for their presentation. Ingun is the head of the technical support unit in charge of the capacity building at IBES, and she will present us with the way IBES implements its capacity building activities. Mayasun Mustafa is an IBES fellow and will present us her experience with IBES. Ingun, please, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Alexandru, for that kind introduction and greetings to all. I'm excited to be here and present on the capacity building function of IPBES. So the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, or IPBES for short, is, as you know, a rather young science policy platform established in 2012 with currently 145 states as members. We'll take the next slide, please. Perfect. Capacity building is one of the 4 functions of IPBES with now well-established objectives, programs, and activities. Though it is a process guided by the decisions of the IPBES plenary, so let me take you quickly through how we got to where we are today. Next slide. Perfect. At the intergovernmental meeting in 2012, where IPBES was founded, states adopted the functions, operating principles, and institutional arrangements of IPBES, and capacity building was decided to be one of the 4 functions. In addition, integrating capacity building into all relevant aspects of its work according to priorities decided by the plenary became one of the operating principles of IPBES. At its second session in December 2013, the IPBES plenary established a task force on capacity building and requested the task force to develop a proposed program of fellowship, exchange, and training programs for consideration by the plenary at its third session. And in the same decision, the plenary also invited platform members and observers to submit to the Secretariat their capacity building needs directly related to the implementation of the platform's work program for the period 2014 to 2018. So if we go to the next slide, we see that these reported capacity building needs were structured and prioritized following a series of informal consultations and then presented and approved at IPBES 3. Next slide. The approved prioritized capacity building needs that we saw on the last slide then fed into the work and development of a foundational document on the work of capacity building under IPBES, namely the IPBES Capacity Building Rolling Plan. This document was developed by the task force in close consultation with governments and stakeholders, and especially through the meetings of the Capacity Building Forum, and then welcomed by the plenary at IPBES 5. The Capacity Building Rolling Plan identifies the principles, strategic directions, and modalities for capacity building, and basically says how IPBES works on capacity building and how other organizations and institutions can support capacity building needs identified by IPBES. And the plan has 3 strategies with activities under each strategy. And then if we go to the next slide. Perfect. So in 2019, at IPBES 7, the IPBES plenary adopted a new work program for IPBES up to 2030. And note that Objective 2, building capacity, draws heavily on the capacity building rolling plan, where the 3 sub-objectives of the work program corresponds to the 3 strategies of the capacity building rolling plan. And these are highlighted on the slide in green. Also note that the work program specifies who will be implementing the sub-objectives. This is highlighted in yellow on the slide. So for example, activities under sub-objective 1, enhanced learning and engagement, will primarily be implemented by IPBES with funds from the IPBES Trust Fund, while strategic partners and collaborative supporters will implement activities under sub-objective 2, facilitated access to expertise and information. The 9th session of the IPBES plenary welcomed the deliverables for capacity building structured under each sub-objective. And at each of its sessions, the plenary considers work plan on capacity building for the upcoming intersessional period. And this lists all planned activities and the related budget. So let's take a look at some examples of these activities outlined in the work plan. So you can So one of the capacity building activities undertaken is the IPAS Fellowship Program, where early career individuals take part in assessments as authors and receive training and mentoring. All IPAS assessments started since the establishment of the fellowship program included fellows, and this means that over time 131 fellows from 67 countries have participated in the program. And you will hear more from one of our fellows, Maysoon, in a few minutes. Secondly, the so-called training and familiarization program includes both face-to-face training and e-learning resources. In-person activities undertaken by the task force to date include writing and training workshops for IPAS experts to further develop their capacities to contribute to the production of IPAS assessments. And the task force has also organized youth workshops that aim to support youth participation in IPAS processes and enhance their knowledge on IPAS assessments, key findings, and other deliverables. E-learning resources on IPAS deliverables and processes include webinars, e-learning tools, guides, such as the IPAS manual for national focal points, and best practices. All e-resources are then made publicly available on the IPAS website. Next slide, please. Another capacity building activity are dialogues that bring together government representatives and stakeholders with IPAS experts on key IPAS deliverables and processes, such as during the external review of an assessment. Furthermore, these dialogues provide an opportunity for government representatives to share experiences and best practices. Most meetings are online, but last year we held an in-person dialogue with new IPAS members and observers in Rome to develop capacities of these new members and observers in relation to IPAS deliverables and processes and encourage IPAS membership. Another dialogue meeting, this time for all IPAS national focal points, was held in Norway in December last year to, among other, facilitate knowledge sharing, peer learning, and networking among the government representatives. Next slide. So the achievement of Objective 2, which is building capacity, relies on support and contribution from a wide range of organizations and institutions interested in or already conducting capacity building activities supporting the IPAS work program. So far, more than 250 organizations and institutions have contributed to this work. IPAS calls for contributions on capacity building once a year, encourages the establishment of self-organizing communities of practice, and encourages the establishment of national and sub-regional science policy platforms, networks, and assessments to strengthen national and regional capacities. IPAS does not provide any financial support to these organizations, but we do offer non-monetary support, such as sharing printed or electronic materials, feedback on draft agendas, or contact details for relevant IPAS experts. Next slide. Thank you. The IPAS Capacity Building Forum brings together institutions and organizations supporting or interested in supporting the work on capacity building under IPAS. It provides an arena to increase engagement and facilitate cooperation among such institutions and organizations around a specific topic. So, for example, the fourth meeting focused on the establishment of national and sub-regional platforms and networks. The fifth was on business and biodiversity. And last year, the focus was on building capacities of youth on the science policy interface. The seventh meeting will be organized later this year, focusing on building capacity in support of the second global assessment of IPAS. And then the fellowship program has really been well received by governments, institutions, and fellows alike. And I have been asked to hand over the floor to one of our fellows in the Nexus assessment, Maysoon Mustafa, for her to tell us about her personal experience of being a fellow. I will leave you with a map showing where our fellows are based, and maybe there is an IPAS fellow in your country. And on the right-hand side, you can see some quotes from the fellows themselves. And in addition to the capacity developed on an individual and institutional level, we are very, very happy to see that the fellows are now taking on new roles within IPAS. And with that, thank you for your attention, and I'll hand over to you, Maysoon. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ingunn. So Just good morning, good afternoon, good evening to wherever you're dialing from. As England mentioned, I am Maysoon Mustafa. I'm an IPBES fellow, and I will share a very short reflection with you on my personal professional journey and the pivotal role that being a fellow on the ongoing IPBES Nexus assessment has played. So just for context, I'm part of the Nexus assessment, which is a thematic assessment of the interlinkages amongst biodiversity, water, food, and health. And for background purposes, so I'm from Sudan. I've been a member of the Sudanese Environmental Protection Society for 25 plus years, which has been the backbone of who I am today and what I do. My background is on food systems, so I've worked on food loss and food waste and spent a significant part of my career working on integrating nexus approaches to evaluate water, energy, and food dimensions. But my career has evolved to a wider lens where I now work on science policy and science funding. I work at the Principal Funding Agency for Research in Science based in Ireland, where I manage funding programs that look at context-specific solutions for complex sustainability challenges. So over to the next slide, please. So in 2021, I was nominated by the Sudanese Higher Council for Environment and Natural Resources to participate as a fellow in the Nexus assessment, which came at a very timely point in my career, just to learn about the interface between science and policy and biodiversity and ecosystem services, and to draw on my experience in food systems and nexus approaches to contribute to the production of this major scientific assessment. So working on this assessment is an unpaid scheme as a supported fellow from a developing country. Expenses for attending selected meetings are covered for me in accordance with the United Nations rules. So these are 4 key components here that I've identified for that are of significant importance to being a fellow, which I will explore in the following slides. So next slide, please. This slide demonstrates the extent of engagement and activity, so from 2022 up until the end of this year, and how all these different activities synchronize with each other. On the top half there, you can see the key author activities. So all 3 of our author meetings have now taken place, and my participation in these activities has all been supported by the IPBES Fellowship Program. On the lower half there, you can see those are the key fellowship activities. So these are additional activities that being a fellow we access, which include fellows workshops, 2 of which have already undertaken, and I'll explore them further when I discuss the bespoke skills development piece. We do have a 3rd fellows workshop that'll be coming up later this year. Next slide, please. So going to the 4 central components that I identified, at the heart of it, one of the main aspects is the network of fellows. And this is an incredible network of brilliant, inspiring peers that one can become immersed within. So at the core of it there are the 13 fellows that are part of the Nexus assessment, which includes myself. And then through the annual workshops that we attend, we engage with and learn from fellows on other IPBES assessments, such as the transformative change, values, invasive alien species, and these networks that we build there continue to thrive. And then you can see there in that ever-widening circle, this network continues to expand as we connect with the IPBES fellow alumni. So we've reached 131 fellows to date, as well as with that future lens of looking at future fellows as part of IPBES assessments. And this means that in this ever-widening network of peers, we share similar experiences and we form a community of practice that works together to mobilize resources and expertise to develop cross-cultural collaborations that support IPBES's mission, strengthens knowledge foundation for better policy through science, and for the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. And as Ingun has mentioned, a lot of the former IPBES fellows have now taken on more senior roles where some of them are leading and coordinating leading authors on the current assessment that I'm part of. Others are on the technical support units or even members of the MEP. Next slide, please. So another kind of key aspect as well is working with and being mentored by leading experts that are part of an ongoing assessment. So I've been incredibly grateful to have been paired with a senior expert within this Nexus assessment who has acted as a mentor to me. And that relationship has extended beyond the assessment, supporting me in my career as well as personal projects, such as working on Sudanese food systems. Additionally, we get to network with other leading experts within the assessment. And in my professional role, I've been able to draw on the network of experts to support some of the key funding programs that I manage. An example of which I've brought out there is a program that we run on a healthy environment for all, which is funded under the EU Recovery and Resilience Facility and funds teams that seek solutions to ensure clean and healthy air, water, and soil for all. So next slide, please. I'll pause on this slide for a bit, just to kind of summarize all the skills support that we access through this fellowship program. And these are principally through our fellowship workshops, which I've mentioned we've had 2 to date, and there's a 3rd one coming up. So each hexagon there just holds such a deep place in my personal and professional journey. During our first fellows workshop, which was hosted in conjunction with the IPBES 9th plenary session, it meant that in practical terms, we were able to spend a lot of time with our network of peers, learn from each other. There were dedicated training sessions on essential skills that support us as we work through the assessment, as well as being able to hear from experts and national representatives who have long-standing experience on the IPBES processes. But also, because of the way it was hosted in conjunction with the 9th plenary session, we were able to observe and sit on important discussions that took place during those plenary sessions. During our 2nd workshop, which was hosted at the UN offices in Nairobi, it was a very pivotal moment to really learn about the UN and global environmental governance, as well as participate in IPBES capacity building workshop that was hosted at the National Museum of Kenya, and was such a brilliant platform to meet with incredible actors, all of whom are passionate about biodiversity ecosystem services, and share our experiences with them about the Nexus assessment and about the fellowship program. So next slide, please. And obviously, I think the final but very, very important component there, which is a central piece to the whole program, is contributing towards an assessment piece itself. So as a fellow, I get to build on my experience and expertise and author key sections within this report, often in collaboration with other leading experts. In addition, we get to liaise with experts across the assessment overall, just to ensure cohesion and coherence across the chapter. And a very important piece as well that we get to work through is engaging on internal and external reviews of the assessment, which is a very important and humbling piece of work to do, just to kind of really reflect on that power of word and what you put down on paper and what that assessment actually means when it is actually used as a tool to share that knowledge at a wider scale. Another final component there, which is that bottom left quadrant. So there are multiple cross-chapter working groups within an IPBES assessment. And one group that I have been part of is the Indigenous and Local Knowledge Working Group, which is coordinated by the Technical Support Unit for Indigenous and Local Knowledge. And it just plays an incredible role in recognizing and working with Indigenous and local knowledge and bringing the contributions, concerns, and priorities to the attention of policymakers, decision makers, and broader society through this assessment piece. And that's a very important piece of work that I was able to contribute to and learn from throughout this journey overall. So bringing it all together, onto the next slide, please, and then moving on to my final slide. So just to kind of bring all these different pieces together, thank you for coming on this journey with me as I reflect on how those 4 central components of being an Nexus Fellow and what that means. So in terms of outcomes, if you look over there to the short-term outcomes, I can see how it translates to kind of 4 principal access points with regards to access to resources and skills, strength and knowledge and awareness of science policy and platforms, that widening network of collaborators, and really strengthening community engagement and leadership. And then kind of mapping this down, I can already see how my role as an IPBES Fellow can contribute towards 3 core IPBES programs. The very central piece there is assessing knowledge. So I've already contributed towards knowledge assessment and shared my experiences and expertise through this Nexus assessment. To the left there, strengthening knowledge foundation. So I am in a unique position through my role at a funding agency where we can contribute to the synthesis of knowledge by supporting important scientific efforts that address knowledge gaps. And then finally there, that right piece, which is a very important part to me, is building capacity. So I've been supporting and continue to support capacity building efforts in Sudan, my home country, with a particular focus on the participation of youth and girls in science and working towards ensuring a better biodiversity and ecosystem services for all. So thank you everyone for your kind attention, and back to you, Alexandra.
Thank you very much. Thank you both for your presentations. We can see that IBES has really invested in its capacity building function, focusing on support to the work of scientists as well as policymakers involved in the process. It is interesting to note that the way IBES capacity building function has been implemented through a roll calling work program decided upon the plenary. The governing body of IBES allows for flexibility and adaptation to any priorities that might arise through the time. Now I will open the floor for questions that you might have for our presenters. We'll take the questions that have been asked in the chat. I just want to remind everyone that any general comments related to the capacity building function of the SPP should be kept aside for dedicated discussion after this Q&A session. So, just a second. Okay, so we have a comment from Jill from GAHP. She would like to ask IBES to come back to the text on capacity building and comment on it. And as well as I'm inviting GAP to come back during the discussion session for the rest of the comment. So Ingor, we have the floor to respond to the question put on the chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much again, Alexandru, and thank you, Jill, for the question in the chat. I don't know if it's possible to go back to the slides, but the capacity building rolling plan that you're referring to, that's basically setting out the principles, strategic directions, and modalities for building and further developing individual and institutional capacities based on the priority needs established by the IPBES plenary. And these have then fed into the work program. So if we go to the next slide, because the capacity building role of IPBES is operationalized through these objectives in the work program for the period up to 2030. And if we look at the text all the way on the top there, it basically says objective 2 is to build capacities of individuals and institutions for a strengthened science policy interface for biodiversity and ecosystem services. So that's the text that says there. There's no definition per se on what capacity building is in the capacity building rolling plan, which might seem a bit strange, but it just showcases how IPBES would work with capacity building. And together with the work program, as well as the work plans, the intersessional work plans, and that is presented to the plenary each year for the intersessional work, then that sort of provides the basis for how IPBES is working with capacity building, and it's all by decision by the member states, right? So, and it's a living document. It's a process that evolves through discussions with governments. But I think maybe that top text there was what you were looking for. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. So, I think there are no more questions. So we are now reaching to our open discussion. This session is meant to allow you to express your views on the capacity building function of the panel. It is an opportunity for each of us to ask the questions one might have, express his own or her opinion, and give clarification on certain aspects in need. A questionnaire is also available on the online webinar site for everyone to express their views in writing. I want to thank everyone who has already provided us with inputs. Our current discussion and those written inputs will serve as a basis for the Secretariat for the information document summarizing the views expressed for the information of the ad hoc open-ended working group in its third session. This session will organize around 3 questions. First is what should be the focus of priority capacity building activities for the panel to undertake? The second one, how can we avoid overlap and duplication of work? How can coordination and cooperation be promoted within relevant multilateral agreement, other international instruments and intergovernmental bodies and others? So we will explore all these questions together. We'll open the mic for some participants who register in advance. Other participants can share their views through the written inputs until tomorrow. So the floor is open for discussion. But before that, I want to reiterate our first question. What should be the focus of priority capacity building activities for the panel to undertake? So I would like to give the floor to Wilhenia Kwae. She had a comment in the Q&A session, but it was a more broader question if you ask me. So please take the floor and you can express your views and receive a response. Thank you very much.
Hello.
Hello, hello, please.
Yeah,
go
so
on.
the question to the speaker, the last two speaker, is whether they had capacity, gender policy for the capacity building. Because I realized that the trainees, you had females and males, and the females were more than the males. I'm wondering, did you have any gender policy to guide the capacity building processes? Thank you.
So our colleagues could help us with a short reply. From IBES.
Yeah, hi. I wasn't sure if I was taking the floor, but yes, we do have a policy on that. There's a policy both on, we're really trying as best as we can to get both a gender and regional and interdisciplinary balance within the group. So the short answer is yes.
Thank you very much. Now I want to come back again to GHHP to come to the discussion with the rest of the comment that it was made. That was about as well more general. So please take the floor. You are free to take the floor.
Thank you very much.
You are muted, Jill.
Am I muted or am I unmuted?
Now everybody can hear you.
Good, thank you. And thank you very much for very interesting presentations. The reason why I was asking IPBES about their actual definitions and what they had in their foundational document was a certain concern that I have about the two opposing, if you like, texts that we have before us. I'm not sure that they are going to be a very fruitful basis for going forward, because they were designed to be opposites, and that's not usually a productive way to get to the next round. And we need very much to move beyond worrying about the text to start defining what we might want the SPP to do at the very early stages to make sure that capacity building works properly. And for that reason, I found it very interesting that Igun was saying that they had never actually defined capacity building in the IPBES text and that it was very short. What was absolutely fundamental was the rolling program. And if I may, that takes me to the next sort of question, which is that IPBES representatives were quite careful to say that this was not a program that had a large amount of funding attached to it. And I wondered how much that actually hurt the program, or whether through modern day communications, they were actually able to do quite a lot. I can see that you can't build laboratories without money, but I'm not sure whether that's what we're trying to do. So I would like to come back to the best representatives and ask them how much of a break on good capacity building is not having a large pot of money. Thank you.
Much. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Jill, I think you're correct in saying that it's not only us, but all these different panels and platforms are struggling with the amount of money that's available. That said, I think that also made IPBES aware of the necessity and need of working with other organizations and institutions on trying to be able to conduct as much capacity building as possible. And by aligning activities with other strategic partners, collaborative supporters, and all these wonderful organizations and institutions that are putting their hand up and saying, we would like to support IPBES and the work that IPBES is doing through our capacity building work, has just made, I think, personally, a really massive impact that we could not have made just by ourselves. We're 3 people here in the technical support unit. We have a task force, of course, on capacity building, so limited human resources and limited financial resources. But I think by facilitating these meeting points and networkings, and also by the plenary itself deciding, the governments, the member states deciding what are we prioritizing, what would we like to pay out of our own pocket, and what can we ask others to help with, has made a positive impact around the world.
Thank you very much, Ingen. So the next person on the list is Henrietta Ampofo from CYMG. Please, you have the floor.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much for the presentations. They were very insightful. I just want to find out about the capacity building sessions, the involvement or the aspect for youth, and especially for children. I know when it comes to science policy, information can be very technical, but this same information can also be broken down into very simple forms for older children to be able to understand. And so I just want to know that aspect of it, as well as how accessible, or should I say how inclusive it is. Most of the sessions, I mean, I've seen a few of the sessions in other languages, but most of the sessions are in maybe 1 or 2 UN official languages. Are there plans to ensure that these sessions are done such that it is all inclusive, so that people from different, people that speak different languages, especially the 6 official UN languages, are included? Materials that are produced to help people digest information, to build their capacity, are put in, these official languages so that they can, access them. Yes, definitely some of the reports, not all, are put in the 6 official languages, but you get a lot of the information mostly in English or French sometimes. So are there plans towards this, so that the capacity building session does not just favor Anglophone or Francophone speaking people. Thank you.
Thank you as well. Please, we can have an answer on the. And I'm taking the opportunity for this to please, I will reiterate the 3 questions because I want to have it all of those 3 to be spread around in our conversation, because I think all 3 questions are essential for our discussion, the final discussion at SPP. So please try to touch every question if you want it, because it's very important to see and to have a response on all of 3 of them. Thank you very much. So please, I am waiting for a helping hand from my colleagues with the response. From the question from Henrietta. Tessa, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm happy to briefly comment on this question and comments as well. Thank you very much. The point that you're making is that what is relevant to different audiences in your particular case, children, is also to be communicated in a way that it is accessible to them. I just wanted to kind of maybe pick up on an example from another science policy interface, the Global Environment Outlook, whereby it's not so much that they have taken the approach to have targeted products being derived, being produced for children and youth, but actually by children and youth. So I think that is perhaps an interesting model to also look at, whereby then there is a direct engagement with stakeholders, but also in the prioritization of what are the issues that are of most importance or of most interest to that audience. And perhaps I also take the opportunity to just remind everyone of the 5 functions that the Science Policy Panel has. So yes, capacity building, of course, we are talking about it right now across the board. I've been hearing some reference to the public awareness function, the one that is related to providing up-to-date and relevant information, identifying key gaps in scientific research, encouraging and supporting communications, and disseminating findings, as well as facilitating information sharing with countries. Of course, assessment is a major function also for the IPES, and then there's also the function of horizon scanning. So perhaps as the a request was sort of across the board to support the functions, I thought it might be helpful to just remind everyone briefly of the 5 functions for the Science Policy Panel, or the 4 that the capacity building would be possibly supporting. Thank you.
Thank you very much as well, Tessa. So the next in the line is Luc Dempaille. So please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Alexander, and thank you to Geneva Environment Network and Open-Ended Working Group Secretariat for organizing this webinar. I should say that I speak on behalf of the EU and the member states, and that we think that capacity building is a very important function. And we think that the focus of priority should be on, like Tessa.
We lost your, we don't hear you. Something happened.
Apologies.
Okay.
I was saying that we want the capacity building to be focused on facilitating the objective and all of the functions within the scope of the SPP. And since the panel is focused on knowledge and skills of researchers that want to contribute, that should also be the function, the focus of the capacity building. I also want to react to what Jill Hanna was saying about the two opposing texts that were proposed. I don't think this was deliberately proposed as being contradictory to anything else. I think the EU is taking a very constructive and open-minded approach, which is also why we've already suggested a text that is very broad and inclusive, so it doesn't exclude any possibilities. In fact, we think it's up to the SPP panel, once it's established, to see what are the needs at that moment. And therefore, I found it very insightful to hear how IPBES has been doing that, and also the examples of capacity building things that they've shown, I thought was insightful, and we do recognize that some of these things would fit well within the SPP, whereas other things that are not really focused on the functions of the SPP could be done, for example, through strategic partnerships, also much like the people from IPBES have presented earlier today. So thank you.
Thank you as well. So next on my list is Ocean Dyer, Switzerland. Please, you have the floor.
Hello, thank you very much. Thank you for organizing the webinar and for the precious inputs from the different sides. We believe that the presentation of IPBES was particularly interesting for us because it shows how its capacity building activities support the other functions of the panel. Because the main function of the panel should be to assess knowledge and provide policy relevant information. It should collect, analyze, and synthesize existing scientific information and identify knowledge gaps. That's why we are in full support of a capacity building function that is in support of this main function and goal of the panel. I would like also to touch upon the third question that is asked here about the coordination and cooperation, because actually I believe that using synergies and avoiding duplication is actually at the heart of the international chemicals, waste, and pollution nexus dynamic. And there are numerous initiatives that have helped and continue to promote this coordination and cooperation between the various actors. And just to name one example is the joint secretariat for the three conventions, Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm. And the SPP can also make its contribution, because by making assessments and synthesis reports, that by making those available to various actors and institutions, it will provide a common basis for discussion, for prioritization of tasks, and also for task allocation in general among the different actors and institutions. And it will also enable a clearer analysis of synergies and overlaps between different mandates. So overall, the SPP can provide the necessary independent assessments of the science with respect to status and trends in the field of chemicals, waste, and pollution as a basis for informed decision-making at the national and international policy levels. And this could definitely contribute to coordination and cooperation among the several and different actors. Thank you very much.
Thank you as well. Let me see. Until now, I see no one, but then maybe if you could, it's a question for every participant here, that will like to take the floor. Maybe if you want to specify your view on what functions should be done by SPP and what should be done by other bodies as well. So please feel free to raise your hand if you really want to take the floor.
Alexandru, you are muted.
Oh, so sorry. I think there are no questions left. Then I want to thank you all for this fruitful discussion. And
There are people that
No, they
are
aren't.
asking. They are on the screen, Alexandru, and on the chat also.
Sorry. Which one was the first? Just a second. I think the next on the list is Wilhelma again. If you please, if you want to raise a question.
No, I haven't asked for the floor, sorry.
Okay.
No.
Wilhelmia?
Yeah, thank you. So my question is in relation to the strategic partnerships to support the capacity building plan or strategies. I want to ask, how did you ensure the participation of the private sector in these strategic partnerships?
Thank you very much. Then I think that is for IPBES. If you could help me with a reply.
Of course, no, happy to do so. Within IPBES, it is structured so that there are 4 strategic partners. It's the UN organizations, it's UNEP, UNDP, FAO, and UNESCO. Those are the 4 strategic partners of IPBES. In addition to these 4 strategic partners, we have a number of what we call collaborative supporters. And these are organizations or institutions that have supported IPBES on capacity building or on one of the other functions of IPBES. And that can be support in the capacity building sense. It could be that they have developed some training material. It can be that they provide a venue for a meeting with coffee breaks. It can be different things, but it means that they have contributed quite a lot to the and helped IPBES. So what happens is that the task force then will, on regular intervals, look through who they have been working with and then suggest some of these organizations and institutions to the IPBES Bureau. And then the Bureau will then make a decision if they are going on that collaborative supporter list that you can find on the IPBES webpage. How we are reaching out is because we do have a lot of this bilateral collaboration with other organizations and institutions. We do have a call each year for contributions on capacity building activities in support of IPBES and the capacity building function. So there we will have a lot of organizations and institutions self-reporting what they are doing. And that can be small things and larger things, and from local organizations to global organizations would report in there. And when it comes to businesses, we are either actively going out reaching out to them, but we also see that a lot of business organizations are coming to us as well, especially since IPBES now started or is in a process of writing a business and biodiversity assessment. So there's quite some interest there from businesses as well, but we can always do better, of course.
Thank you very much for your reply. And then, so the next on my list is Rabe Balawi. So please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Alexandru. This is not a question, but some remark regarding the function. I think it's important that the function focuses on providing accessible and engaging learning opportunities through these kind of online platforms. Also, I think it's important to utilize innovative technology like AI-driven educational tools, so to enhance the effectiveness and the inclusivity of these capacity building sessions. And I think that this panel or this capacity building through this function can support the development of these future young leaders by involving them in the capacity building sessions. Also, it's important to have more collaboration with educational institutions and industry partners. Also, I'd like to talk about the language, because not all the people have the, let's say, they are not all expert or specialized. So it's important to take in consideration that some people are new to the subject, and unfortunately, sometimes when we talk about chemicals waste and pollution prevention, some experts, let's say, use some hard word. I would describe it some hard words. So it would be better to take in consideration that some people are new to the subject. So I mean, not all the people are advanced, so there is beginners also. So the language should be easy to understand for them too. And thank you.
Thank you as well. So let me see for a bit. Next on my list is Sharika Witeloki. Please, you have the floor. Thank you.
Yes, good morning. I was actually just typing in the chat, but I was responding to the 3 points that are on the screen. And the first one was, what should be the focus of priority capacity building activities for the panel to undertake? So first I'd ask the question, because we're looking at capacity according to regions. And I'm thinking first we need to identify what it is that each region would need in terms of capacity building for us to know what would be the priority, because it differs from region to region. What would be needed for African region compared to GRULAC region, compared to the European region, would be totally different. Once we would have identified what is needed within region, then we can build a capacity building program priorities accordingly. And the second one, how can we avoid overlap and duplication of work? Is it possible for us to make a master sheet where we actually look on all the work that should be done? And then once we look on all the work that should be done, we can coordinate it. We can cross-check to say, this is the work that is to be done. We have specific items for work team, and they have specific objectives, and they have also specific outcomes. Once we would have done that, we can cross-check to see, do we have duplication or do we have complementing work? What complementing work does, it helps to strengthen the work in a particular area. And that will also help with the coordination and the cooperation promotion. We need to look on all the instruments that we have, and we put all of them on this master sheet. This instrument is specific for this. This one is, where do they complement? Where do they duplicate? Where can we cross out the duplication? And we're more so on the complementing and strengthening of instruments and the working bodies. But they must be integrated. It can't be an isolated work where you have one set of a group looking on a particular instrument and another set. You need to have a team that look on the entire thing in totality, so that there can be a comprehensive analysis of exactly what it is that is happening within the instruments to see if there are duplication. So that's just my contribution to this part of the discussion.
Thank you very much. Ingun, could you help us with your experience and your view on this? Thank you very much.
So I think just based on how IPES has been doing it, it was this request for capacity building needs to be reported into the Secretariat. And I think by that you can also then identify and try and figure out what are the needs and if there are regional differences. Sometimes there might be overlapping interests as well across regions. And then of course the the plan that will have to be developed on how the SPP would like to work with capacity building would then have to look at those needs, prioritize them maybe, and then look at how can we meet these needs, because it's very, very important that capacity building is needs driven, the work on capacity building. So yeah, I think in our case, we have also been doing some regional capacity building work. So for instance, we saw that there was a bit more need for capacity development in Eastern Europe for our national focal points and government representatives. That was a need that was strongly expressed. So then we organized a regional meeting in Eastern Europe. Or we have done other regional meetings as well when it comes to dialogues between experts and IPAS experts that are working on assessments, for instance, with national focal points. So we are trying to fit it to regional needs as well as best as we can. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your help, Ingun. So I can see next on the list again, Henrietta Ampofo. So we have the floor.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well. Thank you.
I'd like to speak on how we can avoid overlap and duplication of work. On reflecting on this question, I started thinking about what is the reason why we have overlapping and duplication of work. And I think one thing that we can do is to actually do a root cause analysis of why we actually have overlapping and duplication of work and tackle it from there. It can start off with the master plan with the agencies or the organizations or the institutions and the work they're doing and why, and then I'm mapping out to see that, okay, fine, we have like 5 agencies working on this similar project, and then there's no agency working on that similar project in this area of the country or of a region, right? We need to find out what exactly is causing that duplication and that overlap. The reason why projects or capacity building sessions are in is because of results, right? And so if you have one institution or one agency going to a particular region and they realize that, okay, fine, we assess the people and realize that maybe this project did not achieve the results they wanted, or they didn't even know about the project, but looking from their assessment, it looks like they still need this. An agency or an institution is likely to repeat the same work. And so if maybe the agency that came before work was strengthened, or like what the speaker, the person who contributed early on saying that complementary work to strengthen the work of a previous one, that would have been a better path to take. Or the agency or the institution that went in for this project, is it that they did not have adequate data on that country, on that region, and so duplicated the work? We need to do a root cause analysis for why certain agencies are having duplication of work and tackle it from there. Because if at the end of the day, we say, okay, fine, this region has 5 agencies or 5 institutions working on this particular project, and so all the others should just shift to the others. However, the results are not what is expected. At the end of the day, what will happen is there wouldn't be any results achieved, because whatever issue there was that was to be tackled was not tackled. All we did was just supposedly spread resources across board to tackle different things, but we didn't achieve the results. So a root cause analysis should be done. Why are we having duplication, overlapping work being done in this region? What exactly is the problem? And then tackling it from there would actually help, curb overlapping or duplication of efforts. Thank you.
Thank you as well for your view. It's a very serious matter of overlapping and duplication. We should try to avoid it as much as possible, because it will make our lives even easier if we manage to do that. So please, is there anyone else who would like to share more views on the capacity building function of the panel? And yet I can see that you had your hand still raised. I think it's a legacy one, or you want to intervene again? Okay.
Sorry, it's a legacy one. I'm putting it down.
Okay, okay. Okay, let me check. I don't want to miss anyone. Okay, I have next on my list Carmen Capiles. Please, you have the floor.
Hello. Yes, this is Carmen Capriles from Reacción Climática, associated to EPEN, and I'm based in La Paz, Bolivia. Speaking about the capacity building of the science policy panel, we need to focus. We need to understand that for this kind of panel, it's very important that we count with people that understand very well chemicals, more than policies, because we have seen in other spaces like climate change that we have people that understand very well policies, but they don't understand the technical or the scientific part of climate change. And that, in this case, is very important because, for example, the conventions, the BRS conventions, they have kind of like gotten stuck in a conversation that happened 20 or more years ago, which were like the COPs. And now we are dealing with a huge quantity of new chemicals that are not into that cannot be included in these conventions, but we still now we know that they are affecting human health, they're affecting ecosystem health, they're affecting animal health, and we're not being able to have that talk because also there is a big part of manufacturers because many of these substances are man-made. There are structures that are not in nature, which is another difference with climate change. CO2 and methane, they have natural sources. But when we start talking about these chemicals, they are all man-made. And we need to start talking about patents and intellectual rights. It's something that, especially in Geneva, nobody wants to talk about it because like intellectual property is something that it's like almost sacred, which shouldn't be, because there is intellectual property that is killing people and killing ecosystems and killing animals, and we need to start talking about it. And for me, it's the huge elephant in the room. And I think we cannot patent, and people or companies cannot be earning from compounds that are damaging us and compounds that are going to be forever chemicals or whatever name we decide to put it now, because before I understand they were COPs. So I think we need to work on capacity building on that sense, not only policy, but also the scientific and technical aspects of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your intervention. There are more questions left, but I'm sorry that we need, for the sake of time, to close the session. Thank you all for this fruitful discussion and your active participation. This has been very interesting. We can see there are many activities to be undertaken, but also a lot of possibilities for cooperation. I want to repeat again, views can also be shared on the online questionnaire that is on the webpage of the webinar until tomorrow. The Secretariat has taken note of all your interventions and will use them for the INF document summarizing the views expressed. Now I would like to thank you all for your active participation and to thank the speakers for their very interesting presentations. As mentioned, the Secretariat will draft an information document presenting a summary of the views expressed. It will be published very soon on the OEWG website with the code UNEP/SPP/CWP OEWG-INF-3. The next steps before the OEWG3 are the following ones. All documents are being finalized and will be posted on the OEWG3 website. The Secretariat has requested to facilitate the regional meeting. Those will take place during May, and I hope this will provide another opportunity to further the discussion we just had, keeping in mind that we need to find textual proposal that we can all agree. Other webinars will be organized by the Secretariat and Jen in the following weeks. The Secretariat and Jen will send you invitation when the dates are finalized. Finally, OEWG3 will take place on the 17th of June to the 31 of June in Geneva, Switzerland. You will find all relevant information as well as documents on the website. It's now time for me to close this session and thank you for your active participation. I will turn the floor back to Diana for final words and announcement of the upcoming Gen activities. Diana, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexandru. As you have heard, the dates of the next sessions of this series will be soon confirmed, and the next one will should take place in May, during the month of May. In the meantime, of course, I would like to thank Alexandru and all the speakers today, but also all the attendees who joined us for the 2 sessions we had today. Thank you very much for the fruitful discussion, which will feed the document that the colleagues are preparing for the Geneva meeting. I would like also to bring the attention of who is still with us online that we are hosting 4 sessions in the run-up to the Intergovernmental Committee to End Plastic Pollution that will take place in Ottawa, the next session meeting that will take place in Ottawa in a couple of days, in a few days from now. We have already people starting traveling to Ottawa this weekend. We will have sessions taking place tomorrow, Monday and Tuesday. You can see on the screen some information and links will be shared in the chat, so we encourage you also to join, for those who are interested in those discussions, to join us at those sessions. And we look forward to see you at the next sessions of the Road to Open and Working Group 3 that will take place in the coming weeks. And we also look very much forward to welcome you all to Geneva in June. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much as well, dear colleagues and participants. It was an honor to chair this webinar, and